Week 1. It's entitled, At the Heart of Silence, the Eternal Word. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 1, these immortal lines appear. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Human vision beholds individuality and separation everywhere. Divine vision beholds the oneness of cosmic vibration, of which all things, no matter how diverse, are manifestations. Cosmic sound, or the Word of God, and cosmic light, these are eternal. The world, as revealed to us by our senses, is illusory. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda relates an early experience he received of the divine aspect of reality. Sitting on my bed one morning, he wrote, I fell into a deep reverie. What is behind the darkness of closed eyes? This probing thought came powerfully into my mind. An immense flash of light at once manifested to my inward gaze. Divine shapes of saints, sitting in meditation postures in mountain caves, formed little miniature cinema pictures on the large screen of radiance within my forehead. Who are you? I spoke aloud. We are the Himalayan yogis. The celestial response is difficult to describe. My heart was thrilled. Ah, I long to go to the Himalayas and become like you. The vision vanished, but the silvery beams expanded in ever-widening circles to infinity. What is this wondrous glow? I am Ishwara, I am light. The voice was murmuring clouds. The voice was as murmuring clouds. I want to be one with thee. Out of the slow dwindling of my divine ecstasy, I salvaged a permanent legacy of inspiration to seek God. Wise are we if we meditate on the experience of Yogananda's and salvage from it even a breath of inspiration. For, quite simply, there is nothing else. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 7th chapter, I made and unmake this universe. Apart from me, nothing exists, O Arjuna. All things like the beads of a necklace are strung together on the thread of my consciousness and are sustained by me. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Well, good morning again, everyone. Very nice to see you. And today, because it is the day after Yogananda's birthday, which was yesterday, January 5th, and also because it is the first Sunday of the new year, the first week of the new year, we thought it would be nice to play a short recording of Yogananda's voice. This is the first track is actually of him on a New Year's Day, greeting a congregation. And then the second is just an intimate talk that he had with his close disciples at a dinner. It was actually a Christmas dinner, but the same kind of talk he would give on his birthday as well. And so I'll load this up here. It's just a few minutes. It's beautiful to hear his voice and feel that he is here with us and that we were there with him. This reading today says something rather interesting, especially related to the new year. It says that this world revealed to us through the senses is illusory. And let us see if that is even something we can relate to, because the world feels very real, and we, not only the chairs we sit in seem very solid, and The experiences we have seem like, well, of course, what is reality other than what we can perceive? And if it isn't reality, how do we perceive what is real behind it? Now, we know even from physics that according to quantum mechanics, even the atoms, even matter is itself but a form of energy. And that there is much space between atoms, relatively speaking. There's much more space between them than anything solid. The little electron going around the nucleus is basically, there's just a tiny little thing. Otherwise, it's just space. And it's the magnetic repulsion of these two that create this feeling of that there's something solid, that there's some resistance. So even physics, which is sort of the bastion of matter and reality, says, well, yeah, it's actually not as it appears. But even more so, when we know the experience of dreaming, that we have a terrible dream, say, and we wake up and our heart is pounding and we feel all afraid, and it may even take time for that dream feeling to leave us, and we may even feel that was it real? Yogananda, when he was a boy, would have a dream. He went through a period where every night he had a nightmare, as he said, that a tiger would come and bite his leg and break his leg. And he would wake up screaming and call for his mom. And she would say, it's just a dream. And he would say, yes, but it pains, meaning, but my leg hurts. That he could even feel that sort of memory of that pain even after waking. But it was just a dream, and he was safe. And similarly, he says of this Indian teaching, this teaching of yoga, that everything that we're experiencing is basically God's dream. That he said, though that's true, that's no excuse for not playing our roles in the dream well. He, for example, Yogananda said, if you bump your head in your dream, you're having a dream and you bump your head, he said, your dream head will hurt. We could say it's all a dream, but meanwhile, we do have these realities seeming to contend with. And even in the teachings of Christianity, we see that even the sort of the most fundamentalist viewpoint says what you do now determines what your life for eternity will be at the day after the day of reckoning. So even then, if you're comparing a few years here versus this eternity, then it is something to say, well, which one is real then? The 80 years on earth or the infinite number of years afterwards? Now, of course, there does seem to be a little problem with that teaching, because as Yogananda said, if a baby is born and dies at the age of 1, how can you determine whether he's fit to go to heaven or fit to go to Hades for an eternity? I mean, he hasn't really had any time to do anything except basically eat and sleep. And so how on that basis can he be judged appropriately? He said it doesn't make sense. And it also doesn't make sense if there is no reincarnation, no second chance, third chance, fifth chance, that why some of us start off with very separate strengths, abilities, circumstances, and so on. Some people are born crippled and so on. Even in the Bible it says that the disciples came upon a blind man, and they asked Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents, that caused him to be born blind? And if we pause for a moment, we say, well, I mean, I can see the parents, but how could the man have sinned to be born blind? I mean, what was he doing before he was born? If this is how it all started, if this were the only life. And Jesus answered that neither sinned, actually, and that this man was born blind just so that he could witness the miracle of the Lord's healing. And then Jesus healed him, and then he could see, and then he ran around the town, and everybody knew this one had been born blind and now could see. So, the way Yogananda explained how Jesus was able to do those miracles and how the great masters in many spiritual paths are able to do miracles is they understand the laws of the dream. and they are in touch enough with the Creator's consciousness to change the dream, as he said. Yogananda did many miracles. And Jesus said to his own disciples, that which I do, you will do, and greater things. And they did. Peter did heal someone who was blind and lame, and Paul did, and they also helped people. They even resurrected someone. I mean, same as Jesus. I say this kind of with excitement because I only discovered this recently when I read through the Bible. I read the Acts of the Apostles, which I hadn't really given much attention to before because it was so long. But I had time all of a sudden, and so it was very interesting. Now, the thing is that if it is a dream, then what's its purpose? Well, obviously, we can have these kind of strange dreams that kind of don't mean anything, and we wake up and don't really remember even what they were. But so every now and then we have a dream that changes us, that we wake up from and somehow we are freed of something, or we're healed, or we have an experience that encourages us. Once a man at Ananda had a dream that he was on this beach, and he was facing the ocean, and then he wanted to go into the ocean, but he turned and he saw all of this tar, basically black, goopy stuff. And he realized that this tar was holding him back, that this was his karma. This was separating him from being able to go into the ocean. And so he tried to take some of it and throw it into the ocean, and whatever he could get into the ocean just kind of dissolved right away. It didn't have any sort of, environmental considerations of pollution or anything here. But he could just get barely a little bit in his hands, and I think maybe he had even a little tiny shovel, and he was trying to get this stuff off of him. And he felt, this is so hopeless. I mean, what am I doing? But what choice do I have? Because it's either this or nothing. And so, for some reason, he felt to turn further, and he turned all the way around, and he saw this huge earth-moving machine, this huge backhoe, basically, with a huge, bucket shovel thing that was scooping out acres of the stuff and tossing it in the ocean. And driving that machine was Yogananda. And he realized all the help he was getting. And that dream changed him. And it had so much power that it's actually changed a few other people too. But that was a dream that he had, that he learned from, that he received power from. And that is the only purpose of this dream. And what's funny is that this world, we can even have all of this philosophy and say that, okay, I know it's a dream, and I know that this is only one incarnation, and that there's a whole collection of incarnations. Again, what evidence do we have for that? Luckily, in the past 40 years or so, we have all of these reports of near-death experiences, of people leaving the body, of dying. I mean, medically speaking, they're pronounced dead and then they come back to life. And so what's interesting is that all these reports compiled have a very similar theme. They're essential elements of the experience that are common to most people. And it isn't that everybody experiences the same thing, but people were experiencing in the early research different pieces, like steps 1 and 2, and someone else would experience 2 and 3 and 4, and then someone else, and so on. Until the researcher Raymond Moody, you may have heard of him, found someone who had experienced all of them. And that was an interesting breakthrough. But in any case, people would leave their bodies and look down and see this horrific-looking mess of something on this operating table, and just say, "Oh, what's that? Who, left that sack of whatever it is on the table?" And they realize that's my body. But they would look and they would see, they would look just like themselves, but it was a different body, identically looking, but whole and fine and full of light. And they came back. These were people without any religious training to condition them to think this way, or even atheists would sometimes have this experience. There was a man who died, floated up out of his body, and then kind of hit the ceiling, and then just sat there and thought, and then he looked down and he saw his body, and he wondered, well, is this it? And then a nurse came in and saw his lifeless form and saw the readouts that, whoops, there's no more heartbeat. And she stopped and she said a prayer. And in that moment, two beings of light appeared on either side of him and took him onward. And of course, he ended up coming back. That's the only way we know the story. But he realized that it was by the virtue of her prayer and faith that he was helped, not by his own. And that made him change his life when he came back. So the beautiful thing about all of this is that if it really is a dream, what are we here for? It's a school. We're here to learn, of course. And just as when we went to school and we took our exams in biology and it was all very terrifying, but we knew that if we didn't pass the exam or whatever, we might not actually die, even though it might feel like we might actually die. Or the spelling test or whatever it was. These were trials we had to face, experiences we went through to gain in strength and understanding. And also just kind of, look, everybody has to do it. You have to spell, theosophical also, and so, learn it. And so this is the kind of experiences we have on this earth. What's funny is we can know all of this, and still, when an experience comes, all of that understanding can go out the window. If we get caught in a fit of anger, as I was caught relatively recently, meaning hours ago, that suddenly all of whatever I was practicing and conditioning and so on were wiped away by just, this is and ought not to be. And it became so important that all of that I had to be that disturbed by it. And it's so funny because that itself, the thing I was angry about, was actually something that hadn't even happened. I had heard that it happened, I had thought that it happened, so I had to have this big experience and self-manufactured, and then I found out the basis of it was false. It didn't even happen. And so that too was a dream, not an unpleasant dream. We can get caught in emotions and they all seem so very real and justified. And yet, it was for nothing. And so that too is a way, actually Yogananda said that's basically what hell actually is. We create our own hell through upset emotions. And this concept of eternal hell is not true. But when we are feeling that way, doesn't it sometimes seem like it takes an eternity? That it will take an eternity? Even when we're sick, sometimes we can't even remember what it was like to feel well. I've had that well, you'll get your strength back. Will I? Do I even have strength? What is strength? It's all fades. There's this miasma, this delusion, this cover over our mind. So then the question becomes, what do we do? Okay, so suppose it is a dream. Suppose that we're here to learn and we learn the best we can. How can we graduate from the school? How can we escape the prison? How can we wake from the dream? And so this is what was also mentioned in the reading that Dharmini gave, that Yogananda's first experience, really, he mentions in the autobiography of a yogi, is meditating and having these visions of these yogis and this light, these silvery beams expanding to infinity. And he says, what are you? And the answer is, I am Ishwara, meaning the divine, God. I am light. And Yogananda says, I long to become one with thee. And he adds afterwards, from this experience, I salvaged a permanent legacy to seek God. To say, this is the point. And it's interesting, just because of what we've been talking about, that this vision was preceded in his life by an illness, a tremendous illness, Asiatic cholera, which is usually fatal. And somehow, by a miracle, actually by appealing to Lahiri Mahashaya, if you can see his picture on the end there, a prayer from Yogananda's mother and himself, suddenly he was cured. It's all described there. So again, he had this vision, which was so powerful, and yet again, it came after a period of darkness, of illness, and so on. And let us remember that. Certainly, I wish I had remembered that those few hours ago, when we are in a awkward, difficult, unpleasant, painful situation, it is the period between two happy situations. We were happy, things were going well. Okay, not happy at all. And then figuring out what is it that made me unhappy, or whose fault is it, or who can I sue about it, and then, after a while, happy again. And so one saint even said, pain is the space between two pleasures, and pleasure is the space between two pains. They are always changing, just like summer into winter and so on. And yet, is there no hope? Are we stuck on this roller coaster? Not at all. Because as we can appreciate that this is a dream, we can become more calm. There have been times, increasingly so, that I have been able to be calm when faced with some really bad news or a really unreasonable request or anything. That's okay. It's fine. It's fine. And been able to do that more. A friend of mine was two friends who were on this path. One had taken Kriya initiation and another hadn't. And the one who hadn't was saying to this sort of more experienced one, I'm just so worried because I have to pass my exams. This was in India where exams, you think exams are scary here. They're just colossally frightening in India. Partly because of the competition. It's like, okay, where do you place out of the 1.3 million other people who took this exam, or billion, sorry. It just, it's just impossible to even fathom the competition. And yet, she was worried about what was going to happen, was she going to get the right job, and so on. And he said, since I have been practicing meditation, since I have been practicing Kriya, that worried part of my mind, he said, is just quiet now. There's even actually physiological research that would justify that. I won't go into it right now. But that is the way out, is meditation. As Yogananda was saying, that he had this vision as a result of meditation. He asked, what is behind the darkness of closed eyes? And that is what he found, what he saw. And so he gave that technique, as Dharmini was leading us in the beginning of the meditation, to hold the eyes, though behind closed lids, slightly uplifted, not enough to cause eye strain, but just slightly uplifted. And that light appears. That is the light shining in darkness. Yogananda explained that passage from the Bible. And we'll get into that throughout these coming weeks. We spend many weeks in the early part of the year going through this part of the Bible teachings and the teachings from the Bhagavad Gita. But the point is that all of this is nice sounding, and it's true. But we need that experience of that truth, and we need our own experience of the truth. That's why I think we're all here. Because it's not enough to know that there were saints who had this experience. We want that too. We want to transcend. And meditation is a powerful tool to that end. Yogananda called Kriya Yoga the airplane route to God. It wasn't to say that it was the airplane and therefore better and every other path was inferior. Not at all. He said even in the recording, all paths lead to God. Or said something like that. But if you want to get there, then why not buy an airplane ticket? Yes, we can swim to India if we're going to India, but why not fly? It's warm and you get a meal or two and then, you're there in 18 hours. And so why do we want to get there fast? Because that hunger is strong in our hearts, that desire. The Indian teachings teach that all souls end up back at God. Every single soul. Why? because we all came from God, and because in order to create anything, he had to create this appearance of opposites, heat and cold, darkness and light, happiness and sorrow, and so on. This duality, as it's called, this twin back and forth. And so, if we have gone out from God's consciousness, we have to obviously eventually return. So there's no worry about will I return. There's no worry about will you return. There's no way to say, well, I don't think you will return, especially after that last thing you did to me. Everybody returns. But the devotee is the one who says, I can no longer wait. I can no longer stand it. I want to come home now. I want to just close by a reading from Whispers from Eternity. Prayer Demand for Illumination. This is a book of prayer poems by Paramhansa Yogananda. O Spirit, beloved Father, Oversoul of the universe, Spirit of spirits, friend of friends, teach me the mystery of my existence. Teach me to worship Thee in breathlessness and in deathlessness. In the fire of devotion, burn away my ignorance. In the stillness of my soul, come, Spirit, come. Possess me and teach me to feel Thy immortal presence in and around me. Come, Spirit, come. Come, Spirit, come. God bless you.